Hi. Oh, I like the pink. This is good.
Those are great chairs.
Well, we have these sort of like throne chairs, but
Oh man,
that would have been a little much, even for us. Yeah.
Those were. I wanted to bring these other pink chairs that were my grandmother's chairs, and I had them fitting them in the car and everything like that was a little more than I could manage.
It was one of those like cute ideas.
Yeah. It would have been too much with your purple pink.
Well, that was the thing, and then I was like, okay, I gotta honor the spirit of the pink.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. Hello, friend.
Hi.
I'm so glad to be doing this with you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for making it out on a hot, beautiful, late summer Saturday. As you probably know, part of the reason I'm doing the talk is that I had the pleasure of doing the essay for the catalog that accompanies the show, that it's my understanding we'll be signing copies of following the conversation, which is so fun. I'm so glad you did a book. It's very classic. That's how we used to do everything.
Nice.
Gen X remembers.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. But, I guess I kind of know, I could just come in here and talk about them whether you were here or not, but that's not what people want. And so I'm going to ask you, like a good lawyer, a question I already know the answer to, which is, please tell everyone, literally just what are we looking at in terms of, literally that's the question, what are we witnessing? Just describe for you where this series comes from, who are the people in the paintings, and how it came to be that this was such a captivating topic for you to put into your work.
Yeah.
And we'll just kind of move through it that way.
Yeah. So I do usually use my three daughters as models in my work. Sometime before them, it was other people that I knew. And as I started to work with them, we sometimes would do moments where we would, go purposefully plan a photo shoot to explore a topic like the fires in the Sierras, or what's in the surfaces of the things we touch, or what is it to be a princess, which they would turn into a princess superhero mix. But this moment happened when they rushed to the bathroom to get ready for something, and it struck me as this thing that we all do, and I quickly took a series of photos. And I thought I would find 2 or 3 that were interesting, and instead I found 9, and started a 9 painting series on them, and you are looking at 5 of them.
Excellent. Yeah, first of all, I love, just as an aside, I love the metallic treatment of the mirror, because I think that these paintings, what I find so interesting about them is that the way that they are, which I think ironically or just poignantly accurately reflects the experience, is you're both invited into the space, and also there's no room for you in there at the same time. It's not like you're being kept out. No one in the image is even really making eye contact with you, much less being get out of here. And yet the room is full and bustling, and it would be hard to find your place in it. But because of the placement of the mirror and the composition, and then the metallic treatment of it, there is a kind of space at the back for you. And it's actually the space that's behind the viewer, right? Mm-hmm. But in the picture, it's the space that's out in front of them, because of how mirrors work. Yeah. So to me, that's almost the most interesting thing, is not every human is going to see themselves in the story of this. I venture to say most women and many men would. But it's not 100% universal. Maybe if you were an only child, that bustle wasn't a thing. Maybe if it was just you and your one single mom, your version of this ritual was something quieter. But everyone knows exactly kind of what's going on, and yet there's all these levels of participating. That to me is kind of where my brain, which I love, kind of keeps circling around, come in, hit the back, where am I in this room?
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to ask you, even though we talked a lot in preparation for the writing, like, where are you in this room?
Yeah. Well, I think that question also goes with a lot of people often ask, in the relationship with my children, where am I too? So there's like a couple parts. One, I'm physically like right up there tight, taking the picture with my big camera, which was how I was able to get into this tiny little space with them and not have it be, I feel like if I had my cell phone, it would have been, actually you wouldn't have been able to see very much in it. And while my girls are all their own individual people, and I think of them as separate, and I think of the figures in the paintings, we think of the figures in the paintings as characters that is also not really them. Like we used to, sometimes we say their names now, but sometimes we would say, oh, that girl, right? Because now this is another thing. It's not actually her, just as in all art is abstract, right? But in figurative work, and also for me, I'm identifying with different people in the work. Otherwise it wouldn't be interesting, right? For me to be even like thinking through. And sometimes, you know, I mean, they look like me.
Well, I mean, that's the, right? So, so there's that, you're like, it's half me.
And I have a lot of memories.
I'm in half of every person in the picture, that's the answer.
Right.
Right, but that's, I mean, I think that's what's so interesting about work like this is like, you know, and why it's girls in the mirror and not like my daughters in the mirror, is because, you know, we're right on that kind of bubble of like, it's not a portrait of them, but, you know, to the degree that if it were like models, like professional models that you cast for a scene about this and you had no idea who these people were, they were just like from the casting agency, it would still slightly be a portrait of them, but not in a way where you were exploring like the inner world of the professional model who's right for the picture you had in mind.
No,
so there is a dimension of I'm looking at my children in a way that's to one side of just straight up maternal. Right? And
well, the psychological of like what's going on inside of them has always been like a huge piece of inspiration for me. Just the same way like what's going on inside of some, if I were to do the painting of the model looking in the mirror, then it would be like what's in the psyche of the model looking in the mirror, right? So psychological. I think many years ago when we met and you said something about it being psychological, I was like, oh yes, that is it.
Well, because also for me, I think just for me personally, there needs to be a broader psychological premise or paradigm. Otherwise I feel weird looking at pictures of other people's kids, and that's just like what it is, right?
Yeah.
So for me, like I think the ways in which your work has always been really assertive about the fact that what's like that art that of equal if not greater importance to that is the allegorical dimension of what you're up to.
Yeah.
To me, that actually gives me comfort and footing in the work, where I don't feel voyeuristic about looking at your family and like people that I've met and know, and it's like, oh, I watched you grow up in paintings, so that's not creepy, you know, like that. It's like that's, but yet we live in a world where we're watching young women grow up on the internet, and that's definitely, unquestionably problematic.
But I've always been very private about my kids' actual images, but people will recognize them from the paintings.
Yes.
And so that's weird. But somebody asked my middle daughter once, how do you feel about being in the paintings? And she said, well, it would be kind of weird if she was painting other people's kids.
Right, like the only thing weirder than not always painting your own kids is randomly painting other people's kids.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point.
Well, and I wanted to say when you're talking about like the space, what a huge inspiration for me is Velázquez Las Meninas.
Yeah.
And that is like this kind of intimate setting where this thing is going on, and the layering of the depth of the person in the background and the mirrors and the reflection. And so the narrative that happens inside of a painting is, in art history, has always been really inspiring to me.
Yeah, and the motif of women looking in the mirror is like one of the most common ones throughout certainly Western art history. And that's very, that's something else. And, and I love it because it pulls apart this whole sort of almost binary of inner life and vanity, right? So it's like I'm looking in the mirror to make myself pretty for probably men, but definitely other people, which is what all the things that we might, might criticize about that, and including the way that society imposes that on you. But also, most people have some desire to kind of like look okay. I mean, like, you don't have to be a vain creature dripping in vanity to like brush your hair and check the mirror on your way out of the house, okay? Right? Yeah. So it's also like just super normal. Yeah. There's the whole like, what's the inner life? How many countless hours have art history students spent attempting to decode the passive or ambivalent expressions on the faces of women having their portraits painted, right?
I know, right? Like why are they making that face? Well, it's because they've been sitting there.
Well, they've been standing there for 3 days, and they're not allowed to eat in that corset. Like, there's a lot of reasons. They hate the person. This is a wedding portrait that's being made, and they haven't even met the guy yet. Like, there's a lot that they could be thinking about. And so, or just their fate as a woman, or maybe they're just thinking about dinner, like you don't know. And that mystery is amazing. And then there's something that doubles about. I mean, every movie, there's a shot, someone looks at themselves in the mirror, and we know that that's a moment for them, right? And so there's all these cinematic and novelistic cues having to do with this exact setup as well. And then to see it, though, through the perspective of different ages, and so different milestones on the path to modern womanhood.
Well, and like a moment of realization where you're like recognizing something of who you are. I remember like when I was young looking in the mirror and being like, oh, that's me, and not something we've been talking about recently, is that when you're young, you might have an idea in your mind of what you're gonna look like when you get to be a real grown-up, and it's never what you have in your mind. It's like not the Disney princess. It's not you don't look exactly like your mom, but you just have something in your mind.
It's coming. Believe me. I'm here to tell you. Yeah. But it's true. It's like you're watching yourself grow up before, and then what you can look forward to on the other side of that is watching yourself get old. That's the other thing we do in the mirror. But, that if you look at like fairy tales, and like a mirror is an object that comes up in scrying and magic and witchcraft, and we're about to get this insane Snow White again, and that whole thing, like it's not an accident. Like there's something to it.
It's like another world.
It is. But it's your world.
And then what you're looking at isn't actually, like, it always kind of trips me out that you're not looking at your own face.
No, you're looking at what people
see your own face.
No, and I mean, as a total aside, although everyone I think will be able to relate to this, one thing that happened in Zoom when we were all Zooming during the pandemic is people discovered the mirror function. So you can actually, there's a setting that lets you, so that it flips, so that what you see is not the flip of you, what you see is what other people are seeing. And people lost their minds. It was like collective, like mental breakdown when everyone realized that their face was totally different than they thought it was this whole time. And it's funny, but it's also like, well, that's who you are. So that's gonna hit you, right? Yeah. And it doesn't even have to, in that way, it doesn't even have to be gendered. Although because of our society, it definitely is. But it doesn't have to be, because, mirrors work on everyone, and everyone went through a version of that. And it doesn't have to be vanity for a person to be in deep contemplation of how the world sees them and how that matches up with how they see themselves.
Yeah.
You've got a perfect little sample size going. Yeah, I mean, so I guess one of my questions would be like, at a certain point, they're gonna grow up all the way up, right? And at that point, have you thought about sort of like what you're gonna do when everyone's on the other side of this kind of primordial time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same question you might ask anybody, any artist, when you're really interested in something and you, like, are you gonna always be interested in that too? But my subject is
Girlhood.
potentially going to keep, I mean, it could be tracking them their whole lives. It could be.
They're like, what? We haven't discussed that.
It could be like them having other little people that I document.
You said when I went to college, I wouldn't have to do this.
I'm just gonna come around taking pictures of you. And, no, but they actually sometimes they're like, okay, mommy, how about could you? You haven't done enough paintings of me recently. How come you're only painting this person or that person? Like, so I don't know.
I don't know.
Depends.
Well, I mean, it's pretty hilarious. But, and it's funny, like also, and you'll see when you read the essay, that we also, as intriguing as like the personal psychology of you and the group and the girls is, there's also a whole, art historical kind of thread, especially not only, but we ended up anyway very quickly coming to have a conversation about women impressionists. And that's partly because it's in the work and partly because they're having a moment right now, as well they should. And it goes way beyond, Mary Cassatt and Bert Morisot, but those are the ones that people, know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of, for a lot of them, you look and it's like, well, those women also often painted women. But if you really want to look at the ways in which they're different from their male counterparts, it's a really interesting case study because on the one hand, they were all committed to this kind of movement and what that represented at the dawn of modernity, photographic vision, interfering, freeing painting up to do something looser and small eye impressionistic, all of that, right? Like, let's paint. And so, okay, but sort of everyone kept, like, topically, it was still kind of like portraits and landscapes, right? And so the style was the thing that was the radically different moment, not necessarily the subject. And so, you have male impressionists painting women in gardens, and you have female impressionists painting women in gardens, and kids are running around. But when you get to the inner life part, or if you really deconstruct the posing and the clothing and things like that, you start to find that it's much more candid and casual and sort of organic. It's like bath time, or I'm sitting in this thing reading. I'm not dressed up for you. I'm not dressed up for anyone. I'm just, kind of, you're much more likely to find just kind of women doing their thing. As opposed to women at garden parties, or right, with all their hats and their frills, right? Yeah. And so even within that, there was already this idea that it made a difference who was looking.
Yeah, and you said that in the essay, kind of with the inner lives, and I'm not going to be able to quote you, but.
Nor me.
You can read the essay.
Grab a book and be like, oh yeah, that was me.
Yeah, it's really scary for me to be compared to the Impressionists because
yes, it is.
When I mean, even though I found inspiration, especially in the American Impressions, the way they used paint, but the bathroom posters and cute, pretty things that we can all live with, and then but so I did appreciate what you said about it being kind of like a revisit, now in this contemporary landscape, that it's also relevant to new ways of painting and our society and time now, that important.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, and it's also, I think important to counter, to the degree that any individual can, the sort of prevailing narrative of like a mental health crisis among both young women and young men for different reasons. But really, the like social media is like a real concrete physical problem. Like people are hurting themselves. And so this idea of setting up comparison to impossible and like AI photoshopped anime fake beauty is not going to get anyone anywhere. But that doesn't mean like you can't just turn off the spigot of like a young woman becoming, coming into herself and finding ways, her own source of beauty and power. So those two things are kind of like sides of the same coin, and you just, you can't shut off the idea of paying attention to what it means to mature as a modern woman. But you got to be careful what goes on in the discourse out there on the sort of internet. And so pictures of young women exist in a radically different context than they also used to. I mean, there was this thing where like if it was children, it was automatically innocent, and that's what children were doing in a painting. They were representing innocence.
Right.
That's not the world we live in.
Yeah,
anymore.
and I find like it's hard for me to find anybody who's painting children, girls, young women in a way that's not like pre-sexualized or creepy. Like those are the two. Like so if anyone's like, oh well, I know this artist. They paint girls, and I'm like, oh, that's not how I'm painting girls.
Yeah, you're like, that's not. I'm
Different.
not. Stop
Different.
that.
So like
that's what I mean. So I think there is
and
yes,
like intelligent and having like
increasingly
an inner
independent.
world.
Yeah.
That's
No men in the picture, like in the physical picture. Like this, they're not. You guys are the ones that are in this. Like this is for them. It feels like it's for yourselves.
Yeah. Which I mean, and so for back to like relating to it, I think also when I would get ready with girlfriends, like high school, college, maybe middle school, it was us getting ready for ourselves too.
Yes.
And so that little safe place, I think, and when I think about my girls like going out into the world, they took a flight by themselves a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I was like, well, if they're all together, they're fine.
Exactly.
Together, they're fine.
No. In fact, I pity anyone that happens upon like a pack of independent girls that are like on the lookout for trouble.
Yeah.
It's like, don't.
Oh yeah, like
just get out of their way.
The metal painting that I did several years ago, it was so funny to hear people's responses because some people would be like, oh, that's cool. And a lot of like young, like, I don't know, 20-something-year-old men would be like, I'm scared of that painting.
Good.
Because it was like the huddle of the
Right,
girls
and the
one
answer is
looking
like,
out at you, like,
good, you're supposed to be
what was
scared of
happening,
this
or like
painting.
maybe they were making a decision about him or his fate or whatever,
Like, well spotted, kid.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's something to that, like the self-contained, and that comes back to the original thing of like the space in the room and who is occupying the space of this painting. And, that there's like it's like maybe there's a jostling for position that's, in front of the mirror that's adorable, but it's what you're saying. It's like everyone, this isn't a picture of like rivalry or side eye.
Yeah,
or
we're just doing this thing together.
Yeah.
I loved what I told my hairstylist about this, and she was like, well, yeah, because, it's not, you just have to take care of your hair or your fingernails or something. Like, everybody does that, it's just a human. And there was a moment when they were all little that I realized, I'm like, I am in charge of 80 appendages, right? 20 times 4. Yeah. I'm like, that is a lot of fingernails and toenails. Like, right? And so as soon as I could, I'm like, you're brushing your hair, you're cutting your toenails, you're
right,
we
your
can all figure this out.
yeah. But I mean, but that's the thing, and I think there's a togetherness, like a little tribe, you know, togetherness, that is also not often what is like the go-to media framework for movies and TV shows about women. Like you get some of it, but it's oftentimes refreshing when that happens, because more often than not, you know, shit out there is more Mean Girls than Sex and the City, you know? But that's what people are obsessed about, shows like that come along.
It creates more drama, and there's dialogue. A lot of what happens between them is not spoken.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Yes.
I think that's where it makes sense to do a painting to explore that, because it's a narrative that doesn't always have words.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's interesting. It's like I want to put the paintings through, like, I want to hear the dialogue so I can be sure whether the paintings are passing the Bechdel test or not. You know what I mean? I think they are. It feels like they probably would be, although maybe decreasingly as things change. But, you know, that idea of like, you know, I am curious about like what's going on. You know, it's so far beyond appearance, right? It's like, and so I think that, you know, it's really, you know, in the end, it's just like, it's an incredibly healthy way to talk about what's going on with young women in our society. And that exists in stark opposition to most of the discourse out there in the media about what's going on. And, you know, it's like, it doesn't feel like assertively empowering, like manifesto-driven empowerment.
Right.
But everybody is so comfortable. They're just kind of looking at themselves. They're not like, oh my God, look at me. And they're not like, oh, I'm a monster. They're just kind of there.
Right.
And I feel that there's just like an incredible, calm, sort of normal, complete existence being depicted.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is maybe not as sexy a message as Mean Girls being a musical now, but it's more important. Right?
Yeah, totally.
So, you know, I feel like to me that's the appeal that goes beyond the compelling personal story of it, which is very interesting. But if somebody didn't know you or any of them, what, you know, there's that other level of interacting with the images. And I like that they're in serial form because it gives it a little bit of that cinematic quality to kind of see.
Yeah.
You know, how it unfolds.
I did hear some fun stories at the opening of people being like, oh yeah, when my sister would draw a line down the mirror and across the countertop, and people like coming up with their memories of, you know, what this version, what their version of this was in their life.
No, I was an only child, but my grandmother was like a makeup person.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm 52 years old, and I remember like it was yesterday, those sort of round powder puff.
Oh yeah.
Powder, right? And the smell, and like the weird little gold marbling pattern, and it came with a little box and a little knob, and then the giant powder puff that was that big, and you would do it, and it was like a clown comedy, and like powder would go everywhere. But that's like what adult women did and whatever. And you know, I find some of those things really beautiful memories, because it's also like for everyone who's like, oh, we're reinforcing, you know, beauty obsession and whatever. It's like, or are we just having like a sweet intergenerational kind of moment of like, and I think it's such an important thing that we live in this world now to find the balance between not caring how we look and caring too much. Women especially, but increasingly for literally everyone thanks to social media, we actually have to reckon with some of that. We have to like define that, and people are like, well, how anti-aging do I want to be? Because honestly, like, I'm not ready to like take my skin off and put it in a freezer and then put it back on to look 5 years younger. Like, sorry, like, let me just, you know, like, but the thing is with technology and with, you know, wellness being the code name for anti-aging torture devices and you know, like all of that we're like swimming in now. I think the idea of having like figuring out a healthy balance of self-image where you look your best but don't trip up about it is actually harder than it sounds and super crucial. And so to me, if you really want to like pull back the layers of like delight, and I love the pink, it's like pink, you know, it's almost like an FU pink. It's so like, right? Like there's a lot of humor and joy and love in the paintings, but I think if you wanted to have a meta conversation about like what thread this pulls on in our social discourse, that's it. And I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, although I feel like basically almost everyone publicly or privately grapples with this on the daily. And so I think showing younger generations having their head on straight about it is actually quite helpful to the rest of us too. We kind of lived through those beauty wars a little bit, and you know what that is. And so I feel like that's all in there too if you want it. That you can also have a beautiful, sentimental, nostalgic appreciation of like the gentle matriarchy that everyone who grew up with single moms dealt with, and just, you know, because I'm not saying this is a picture of a single parent household by any stretch, but in the images, you just see the communication between the women. And so I think people that were raised by a single mother might have extra access to that, even though that's not what the paintings come from or are about. But I did, and I'm thinking about the older women in my family who raised me and how much time we spent in the bathroom.
Well, and I think of looking into the bathroom, like, and seeing my mom getting ready to, my mom was a hairstylist her whole life, you know, and so she always had and my aunt worked for Revlon makeup.
Oh, yeah, yes.
So we would get all the free nail polish from her. Yeah, and the pink was definitely a choice. I don't think I've ever used quite this much pink, just
it's aggressive. It's aggressive, which is what I love about it.
You can see a little bit, like I added a little pink in the hair and for some of the highlights. Just that.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that whole sort of, you know, that amazing No Doubt song that they did, remember, you know, the I'm Just a Girl, and it was like, and the thing is, it's a great ska song, so whatever, but like, you know, I remember at the time hearing her talk about that song, and she was like, well, first of all, the fact that I'm in a band at all, my parents are apoplectic. And second of all, please understand that every lyric in this song is a literal thing that someone said to me I shouldn't do as a girl. She's like, I didn't invent any of this. I just started writing it down at a certain point. And it was like, oh.
I think about the beginning of the Madonna song too. The girls can cut their hair short and wear jeans, but being a girl is degrading because you think being a girl is degrading, like, and it's like, what?
Yeah, and so there's a lot, I feel like, you know, it calls back to some of that, again, as Gen Xers, we lived through the first time. Yeah. So, in case we want to know anything, we know, because we lived through it the first time, and we're the greatest generation as a result. I've been saying that every chance I get now. I even put it in my friend's bio. I was like, Gen X art critic, because I want people to understand that it's the best generation for a reason. And it's because it is, and it's because we were grown adults, fully formed humans with real memories of real life on our own before any of this shit happened. And now it's happened, and we're the ones.
We're the last generation.
We were young enough to adopt the technologies pretty seamlessly, but old enough to understand what it was all derived from and what life was actually like for most of human history until 15 years ago. And so that's a superpower in my opinion.
Analog childhood, digital adulthood.
That's it. It's truly the best version. And so I think that gives someone like you a unique perspective on the current situation in a way that is really helpful. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is partly why I'm a painter, but like also always asking myself, is the thing I'm interested in, should it be painted? Like, why am I painting it? Because there's a lot of ways to make art, but connecting to like, back to like art history, you're like, this is a moment that could have been painted, how was it painted, and how am I gonna paint it?
Yeah, exactly.
And always, like, kind of just knowing. Otherwise, like, should I could be making a sculpture? One time when we did one of our photo shoots, and we like did this whole picnic scene, I was like, was that the art? You know?
It's all really fascinating, and and I often say, as many of you know, because you've heard me say it over the years, that this is where art history is the friend of the contemporary artist. Because believe that there are thousands of years of humans trying to figure out whatever their time's version of this question was. And there's art from those times that reflect that attempt to figure things out. Or that maybe we're not super attempting to pull the psychology apart, but just enacting it, but still form documents and proof, and are still there for us to bounce off of, or to transcend, to embrace, to subvert, whatever, to be in a discourse with. And so, since nothing exists in a vacuum, why not, as an artist, embrace, the context and the lineage that came before? And that's one of the things I appreciate. It's like I see this, and there's all kinds of stuff being activated from my art history studies back there, and I like that.
Yeah, I didn't know. I googled "girls in the mirror" after I had already titled the show.
That's a mistake. But
then I found in paintings. I found like a bunch of paintings that I've always admired. I'm like,
she's in the right.
I mean, I knew it, but I didn't remember all the ones that I had always loved. So that was fun.
Yeah, and also, a great many self-portraits in art history have obviously been done in the mirror. That's the easiest way to do them. And not all of them are because the artist is obsessed with themselves. It's because they're the only person there when it's right. And so, there's a lot. And I just love how, it's all in there. You can enjoy them if you want, with or without thinking about that stuff. Yeah. But if you want to think about it, it's there for you. And that's kind of my happy place. So that's why I was excited to do this. It is 10 to 4 already, if you can believe that. I told you we were going to have a good time. I want everyone to have a chance to comment or question before we go sign some books.
Yeah.